This episode of Four Strings and the Truth is brought to you by The Bastard Instrument by Brian Wright. We'll hear a bit more from Brian in today's episode, and you'll also have an opportunity to win your very own copy of the book.
I think the way I hear music is different, especially without D. Boon. You know, I never had to teach him a song. I just played, and then he would come up with a part to it. Same with his tunes. But then playing on other people's songs and hearing you in context of someone else's music seemed maybe a little too much of a Bogart. I don't know. It just seemed like there's D. Boon, and then there's everybody else.
Hey, it's Sandy Smollins, and you're listening to a long-anticipated episode of Four Strings and the Truth. It's time to check in with Mike Watt. Minutemen, Dose, Firehose, Stooges, mssv, and about a million other projects. That Mike Watt. And if you've ever listened to an interview with him before, you'll understand when I say, this one's like a late-night conversation with Jack Kerouac on a speed binge. Pure poetic stream of consciousness. There will be excursions, abrupt subject changes, and references you'll only catch on a repeat listen. I tried to keep him on track, but honestly, it's best just to let Watt cook. One note for those audio purists out there. There was some construction going on in the upstairs apartment, which is an apt metaphor for something. So if you hear banging and construction noises, please know it's just part of Watt World. Salut! Well, I just want to thank you for this, Mike. The last time we spoke was in 1987, right as Firehose was releasing Raging Full On. I did a piece. I was an intern at Spin, and I begged them to be able to write about Firehose because I was so excited to see you back in the ring. And we did that. I met you at a club in Providence later on the first Firehose tour.
The living room in those days.
Probably. I think it was. I think after the gig, you were wearing like green fatigues and smoking a cigar, and it was a really complete moment for me. So I'm glad to be speaking with you again.
It was by a Samsonite luggage place, I remember.
Yeah, it was a great, very important club, late 80s, early 90s. You guys played there a lot. We're speaking again, the 40th anniversary of the release of an album that has been so consequential in my life and so many musicians and bass players' lives.
I think it actually came out in September. But there was a one-sided promo that came out that went to the radio stations.
There you go.
I think the Husker Zen Arcade one was a couple of weeks before. What happens, we have an album done in November of 83, and then the Huskers come to town and they do Zen Arcade, and we're like, man, we should do a double record too. So we had to write a bunch of tunes and record in March or April. So Joe Carducci only had it a couple months. You know, Ethan mixed it one night, 48 songs.
I've heard you say that.
It's kind of in the neighborhood, but I don't believe July 3rd. When I asked Joe Carducci, he says, well, that's the Husker lore, and since it's Husker lore, that wins. Okay. I love those.
Now, tell me, so 40 years down the road, give or take a month, how has your approach to playing, recording, and performing changed over these decades since Double Nickels?
Well, you know, I can collaborate now with people in a different way. I mean, I started to in 86, right when he got killed, a month or two before, I started my first side band, something called Dose with Kay.
Of course.
After Black Flag, she graduated from UCLA and got an internship there in New Haven. So we're across the country. We keep the proj going, but what we do is in the mail, we send each other cassette 4-tracks. So it's the same concept. It's not trading wave files over the internet, but it's just that idea. But nowadays, yes, I do a lot more of that. In fact, I've made whole albums standing with people I'd never even met. Not so much in the older days. Almost thing, especially the Minutemen days, except for that thing near the end with Kay. Everything went through D. Boon. Everything. I remember helping Saccharine Trust out with a record because the bass player got scared the night before the gig, so they asked me to play live with them. But that rare kinds of stuff for me. Everything went through D. Boon and playing with him. In fact, that's kind of what I did with FIREHOSE. You know, when FIREHOSE came, you said that's when you first... Thank you for putting that thing in spin. Thank you.
I hope it was helpful.
Yeah. If it wasn't, who cares? I'm glad, Sandy. Thank you so much. Because, you know, you spoke your mind. Actually, FIREHOSE had much more success in Minutemen because of, I think, well, for one thing, college radio. REM got radio on college stations. Before that, it was all guys who wanted to work for big labels. They played Journey. Because SST would have me call people. Hey, try this nervous breakdown. Try this paranoid time. No. Because, you know, what D. Boon call them? They wanted to be corporate pawns. So, yeah. But then after REM, for some reason, well, because those guys were going to the shows. Yeah. There wasn't a lot of college guys going to the punk shows in the 70s and early 80s. So, yeah, whatever it did. But I think that was the big way I've changed now. I can collaborate. As far as, like, in-person stuff, I should say that changed, too. Because the stuff is more economical. My second-man organ player, Pete Mazich, made a studio in his pad here in Pedro. I don't have to go to Hollywood. Hour and a half, 2 hours each way. And $1,500 a day. You can record a lot more econo now and good quality stuff, right? He's got an echo chamber. He's building a plate reverb for it now. So the DIY thing, because of econo technology and people's mindsets changing, that has changed the thing. But as far as coming up with what's that C word, content, that's about the same. Still got to use imagination, right? And keep from being a Xerox rubber stamp kind of thing. That's the same.
I feel like one of the good things about the death of monoculture, you can't hear new music on any radio station aside from college now. There's no real nationally recognized music press the way there still is to some degree in the UK. The death of this monoculture has enabled 1,000 flowers to bloom. You're recording at home. Kira, whom I spoke to earlier in this podcast, records at home now and contributes from home. Most of the bass players I'm speaking with, very influential people who worked in the biggest studios of all time, Colin Moulding from XCC. Everything he does now, he does from his garden shed. And I think that's good for the veterans, and it's good for the beginners as well.
Here, look, for the veterans, I think kind of mindset happened from the old days because I had to do it. And I think it's good for all bass players, but to do it for a living, oh my God, thank God I just had to put in my little hitch. You got to go in there. I did it. She won a game show. David Kahn was the producer, man. He asked me to come in. Kelly Clarkson. That's right. Yeah, well, this situation of the quote session play, you got to come in. That's his Village Recorders, not Econo Place, right?
That's a great studio.
It's a good pad, believe me. But it ain't Econo, so you can't be wasting people's time. Sorry for this noise, but it's because of But here you got to come in. Now, I'm replacing somebody's track, which is bad karma right there. But I got to hear the song. I got to come up with a part. And then I got to perform it. Everybody's sitting, looking at you, watching, and it's like, ah! Whereas if they sent you the track at home, you could run it by many more times, right? And do things without that pressure. What I'm trying to say is, I think a kind of mentality, because you have to perform under that situation, you end up with less adventurous stuff.
Right.
Right?
That totally makes sense.
Play what I'm hearing. What do you mean play what I'm hearing?
It's hyper-focused.
Maybe not as much adventure, whereas you got that track at your pad, you can go back, take a shower, whatever, So there's some pluses, some minuses, especially with that session thing. I think it's actually a benefit recording remote.
100%. You've said that in many ways the Minutemen was a completely egalitarian band, both from the way the music sounded, the way the guitar would make room for the bass and vice versa, but also the way you guys wrote songs and contributed songs. Is that your ideal for a band? You're doing so many different projects now, almost like a different ensemble for each project. A, would you commit to like a full-time single band? And B, if you did, would you want it to have that same sort of egalitarian approach?
Yeah, the Minutemen, in a lot of ways, and when I think of the punk movement, it's a reaction to arena rock. Yeah, I don't even think it was a style of music. Look, even the words. It's a slang for a guy who gets fucked in jail for cigarettes. I mean, it's not really about it's more of about we're just going to try our own way, whatever that way is. And what Minutemen was to me, this is D. Boon's thinking, my guess, he ain't here to speak for himself, but this is the way he saw us politically. It wasn't the lyrics. Lyrics, he said, was thinking out loud. He thought by bringing the drums and the bass up was a political move for a band because that's all we witnessed, right? The first gig we saw was T-Rex. We were 15 in 1970. We liked T-Rex, but it wasn't like the records, man. He was this tall. There was no bass, no drums, and even the guitar, everything was washed out. There was something about going to a club and seeing the Germs. Not only was the music original, just the experience for us. Now, I learned from helping the Stooges out for 10 and a half years. That actually happened in the 60s. There was club scene. There was little bands. There was little labels. You know, in a way, the punk thing for us was just us learning about something that already had been going on. But it was an important lesson. So the lessons I learned from the Minutemen, I try to carry to all the projects. But you're right, I do try to make a different band for each project. And that actually came from the end days of fIREHOSE. I remember showing Edward Piss Bottle Man.
Yes. Oh, I didn't. You show that to him before you recorded it for your solo record?
Yeah, the solo record with 48 guys on it. Yeah, very solo.
I thought it was 50.
I was a shot caller, but I was not really by myself. Okay, actually, the title is about it being a test for the bass. I thought the bass player knew the song. Anybody could play guitar and drums or sing. Yeah, you know, what is he? Is he the enabler or is he ball hog? When I showed Edward that song, yeah, it was a song I showed the end days of fIREHOSE. He goes, Michael, you think that's a song this band should play? And like I was telling you before, Sandy, all my music went through D. Boon. So I never thought twice about what song is appropriate for which proj, because I didn't learn that way. But I thought what Edward said might have made sense. And that's why I went for that ball hog or tugboat thing.
Great. It sounds like the work of one musical creator bringing in collaborators. Sometimes albums with a lot of creators sounds like a hodgepodge, especially these days because there's different producers on each track. That album sounds like a consistent vision and viewpoint to me. Different singers sometimes, sure, but the songs themselves.
Well, again, it was like this test for the bass. Could the bass guy be the GO, the point guard who can give the ball, you know, to whoever and make it happen? I thought he could. And that album was actually a test on it. When I hear that record, I hear 17 bands or 17 tunes. And none of them hardly had practice. They were all done right in the moment. I do believe if the bass player has it together, he can make it happen. It's funny because my experience before that, except for maybe reggae and some R&B, bass came last. Bass never came first. Now I'm convinced the future of bass is a composition tool just as much, even not more than guitar and piano, because it actually allows your collaborators more melodic freedom. I mean, we're rhythmic. We can make parts, intros, outros, bridges, verses. But we don't paint collaborators in corners harmonically so much because we don't have chords so much. Well, Herbie Flowers.
Peter Hook.
Right.
Yourself from time to time.
The fifths, right?
Yeah. He loves those drones and
very
those fifths.
Powerful. Very, very powerful. Almost like rhythm guitar.
100%.
Yeah, great bass player, Peter Hook.
When you agreed to reunite with Ed for the 2012 spate of dates that you did with fIREHOSE, what was it like? I've watched some videos of the performances. They seemed really jubilant. You guys are all looking at each other. You're making a lot of eye contact with George, of course. How did it feel to play those songs again?
It was very difficult for me, Sandy. I didn't play like that anymore. 94 January is the last fIREHOSE gig. So what are we talking? 18 years?
Yeah.
I changed. I don't know about your bass playing, but does it stay the same?
No.
It changed. So all of a sudden, I'm asked to play songs that I haven't played like in a long time, and it was difficult. Almost all those gigs, I'm staring at Georgie almost 100% of the time. Oh my God, that was very difficult for me.
Some of the best lines, though, like Chemical Wire. My band actually quoted the song Chemical Wire lyrically just because we love that bass line so much.
Bass lick I got from David Bowie, Black Country Rock.
That makes sense.
So want to know, and I think that's the producer man who went to England. He lives up in Woodstock now. Tony Visconti.
Visconti.
And somebody told me Tony Visconti plays a Watt Plower bass.
I know so many people that have a Watt Plower or it's their main touring bass. I'm in a band with, I don't know if you know, William Whitman, Cyndi Lauper's bassist. He's in my band as well. Yeah, Bill's a Reverend. He loves the Watt Plower.
Guys told me that cat is using a Watt Plower. That's a whole story unto itself, too.
I want to hear it.
Okay, the Watt Plower bass. Well, they made guitars for Ron Ashton.
Ron Ashton.
So they start coming to, and of course, even when I was helping them guys, I was still doing my own tours. And they're in Toledo.
They started in Detroit and then moved to Toledo or something like that. So maybe that's where they got the Ron.
Well, they ain't far either.
That's true.
Right. Maumee River. And yeah. They'd come to my gigs. Hey, Watt, I know you're playing. I had to go to short scales in 1999 because, my hands were getting sore. There's a story about that, too, I'll get into later. I went to short scales because I couldn't even hold the steering wheel while I was driving anymore. They came to my gig, and I was using this 63 EB3. Hey, Watt, we could make you a bass that you could play that would sound better than that one you're playing. So they took measurements of it, and they come back the next tour with this prototype. And I played it the whole gig, and I fuck you very much. I give them back. Well, what's wrong with it? So I give them this list of what's wrong with it. Next tour they come up with another one. Play it the whole gig.
What was the span of time?
The way I tour every year.
Yeah.
So it's next year. It's the next year.
Listen, you're not enough in New York, man. The last time I saw you here was the Dick Watt tour. It's been a minute.
I was there in the fall. Yeah, but I haven't been there as Mike Watt. I was with mssv. But I'll be back this next spring.
Okay.
I had to do an Italian tour. Italian guys, they'll show you tomorrow night. They bring me another one. I play it the whole gig. Fuck you very much. They bring me a third one, the third tour. Man, I was feeling bad. So I played the bass and I took it with me. But then in the email, I said, fuck you very much. What's wrong with it? So I give them another list. They come back with a fourth. By the seventh one, Sandy, I thought they were going to fuck this guy.
Charge you expenses or something.
They kept going. Yeah, give me a bill. That seventh one, I said, you know what? I could play this. I mean, if it was going to have my name on it, it'd have to be something I'd play or I'd feel like a real dick, man. Well, like Vanity. Yeah, they sell this with my name on it, but I won't play it. I was like, no, fuck it. But the seventh one, man. So I started playing it at gigs. And then they do a couple more. So the ninth prototype. That's what you got to say about these Reverend guitars. Especially, I was talking with Thurston about his signature thing. It was like one conference call with Fender with the speakerphone. They don't even, you want a tone knob? No. Okay. Like that.
You're saying Reverend was willing to get in the ring with you is what you're saying. Took it back to the blackboard each time.
Hey, you know what they told me? That's their number one selling bass. I wasn't thinking of other bass players. I was thinking about all the stuff that I wish I had. I was thinking of a touring bass. I wasn't really thinking of recording bass because I was doing all my recording with full scales because I sit down. Now I'm playing gigs sitting down, so it don't matter.
I understand, yeah. The knee, right?
A year and a half ago, the whiskey almost went off the stage. It was like, you know what? Sit down. I asked the mssv boss. It's okay if I sit down. The Italian guy said, that guitar guy says, hey, Fratello Mike, I'll sit down too.
That's so polite.
In the older days, a lot of cats sat down, like in the jazz days.
Yeah.
When the combos got smaller, more standing up.
Yeah.
But piano players, it seems, have always sat. Drummers have always mostly sat.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just where I am in life. I got no pain. And do I really want a fake knee so I could do cartwheels at 66 years old? If I got no pain, I think that's the win situation right there. And at these hands, and by the way, what got me into short scale basses, the swelling of the hands, my pop's pop had bad arthritis. So I thought, oh my God, that's one reason why I got into diaries. I thought I might have to be a writer.
You are a writer. You write more tour diaries than any living musician.
Well, I use it for therapy too, but I should have started 20 years before, right? But whatever, no wine before it's time.
And the Mark II bass, now you added the humbucker and then you can split the pickups out differently.
They let me to keep going because I needed a little more vocabulary. The first Watt Plower, very aggressive, but sometimes you want to get a little calmer. And there's Alnico. I got that pickup from, God, we just lost him. The guy, he was in Houston. He made pickups for Stevie Ray Vaughan. He had a company called Rio Grande, and it was called the Pitbull.
I didn't know he passed.
Just about a year or two ago. That's why Reverend Guitars now is trying to develop a pickup that sounds like his.
Yeah.
but using the Alnico instead of ceramics. Also, I don't know. He designed this thing to replace the pickups in Steinbergers. The space of a Gibson has this PAF size. Well, like I was telling you, that EB3 I went to, it got stole with all the Stooges stuff in 2007, 2008. So somebody, after a gig in San Diego, just gave me a 65 EBO.
Just handed it to you?
Hey, his name was Dan. So I said, I'm going to call this the Dan bass. Yeah, I never met him again. Beautiful cat. But he had put in Lindy Fralin guitar pickup.
Fralin, yeah.
Which are great for guitar, but they had 6 pole pieces. So I replaced it with this Rio Grande guy. Even talked to me on the phone about it. And I just like the vocabulary. If I want to right away go to a more calm thing, I can do it. You can't have more than one pickup on there. Yeah, and you're right. I put another half of a P-bass pickup so I could get that more tight sound if I wanted.
Yeah. And then the reverse positioning, which I really want to try out, so that the lower strings are actually more precise and the upper strings get more of the warmth from the...
We actually did that on the last bass he worked for. Remember, he gets cancer and he sells the company to CBS.
Yeah.
The bass he worked on was something called the Fender Bass 5.
It was a 5-string, though, right?
But it had a C string.
Right. It was a high 5, right, versus a low B.
Had a C string, and it only had 14 frets. He didn't want you to have to come down. He wanted you to go across. He wasn't thinking of the lower B or even the high notes. He was just thinking about having to keep the hand in one place. Remember,
the cash register.
He plays a little bit of piano and a little bit of saxophone. Sometimes the outsider guys, right? That's how they do it.
Not a bassist, not a guitarist. He was a technician. He considered himself a technician.
Actually got the amplifier design out of the Army or something from a radio design. But he reversed the pickups on that Fender 5. There's a poster of John Paul Jones and Led Zeppelin playing one, and you can see the pickups are reversed.
So he even got to that religion later in his development phase.
Well, he's before everybody else, because that's in 1965, 66.
Well, what about a G&L? Would the G&L basses have the reverse pickup?
Well, he doesn't die of cancer. So he goes, and no, he used the full-on PAF on steroid design, so you have 2 coils.
Okay.
But there's something about this. A little more punch, I think, when you got 1 coil each.
Hey folks, I had a chance to speak with Brian F. Wright, the author of The Bastard Instrument, about the book, and I'm going to be featuring snippets of our conversation in the next few episodes. Also, Brian was kind enough to provide a few copies for our listeners, so we're going to do a little contest of sorts. In each of the next 4 episodes, I'll ask a trivia question about the electric bass, and we'll select one winner at random who emails the correct response to 4stringspod@gmail.com. Here's this episode's question. Which company brought an electric bass to market first, Fender or Rickenbacker? Remember, email your response to 4stringspod@gmail.com to enter to win the drawing. We'll select one correct response at random to receive their very own copy of The Bastard Instrument. And now I'm very pleased to have on the pod Brian Wright. Brian, your book is really the first exploration of how the electric bass came to be, its evolution both in terms of technology and the players, and its impact on genres and music history. It's a woefully underexplored topic, in my opinion, and I know I'm biased. But to paraphrase Eric Andre, how did you do something so brave yet so necessary?
Well, thanks so much for having me. I think that what you just said is right, that what I'm trying to do is not just tell a story about technology, not just tell a story that has a bunch of pictures of vintage basses, which I love to look at, and I own probably all those books as well, but really try and find the humanity in the story. What I'm interested in is people. Who built these things? Who played these things? Who made them what they were? The story of the book is basically how the electric bass goes from being invented and being seen as kind of like a toy, as a bastard instrument, to being considered the default instrument of most popular music by the end of the 60s. And that doesn't just happen on its own. That's not just magic. People did a lot of work to make that happen. And a lot of those names are not names that we're familiar with. So sure, I talk about famous bass players. There's James Jamerson and Paul McCartney and Carol Kay and Chuck Rainey and all those other big names are in the book. But the first half of the book is really about the people whose names are not well known, even among bass players, and really trying to give them credit for their innovations and for the developments that they helped spur on.
How many interviews did you end up conducting in the course of writing this?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of people had passed by the time I was working on it. So I've been working on it for about 12 years now. And over that time, I got to interview people like Chuck Rainey. I got to interview some lesser known people like Stan Lark, who was a bass player in the Fireballs. They did Sugar Shack in the early 60s. I talked to Stan. I talked to Jerry Jamad. I talked to a number of the session people. And as with everything, it's about what connections you have and who you can get a hold of and who wants to talk to you.
Tell me about it.
But luckily, when it came to the bigger names, most of them had done lots of interviews before. The more difficult people were the unknown names, in which there is no surviving interview for you to find. How do you dig up information about them? I use my skills as a professional musicologist to find that archive and figure out as much information as I can about Bob Manners, who played with Liberace, or any of the other people, Shifty Henry, who I talk about early in the book.
One of the things that struck me as I read it was, I guess if you're a bass player, it's not a big surprise, but for a lot of people, the electric bass was essentially a corrective. It was like a hack, because having an upright bass and traveling with an upright bass strapped to your roof in the 1940s and 50s, whatever, was a problem. And it was also, you can really hear them well live because most of them were not amplified yet. The early inventors were trying to solve a problem.
So first off, when the electric bass was invented, it was designed to sound like an upright bass. That's the thing that makes listening to recordings from this era a little bit tricky, to tell if it's an electric or an upright in the early 50s, because the point of the Fender Precision bass is it has this foam rubber mute in it that makes the strings deaden, that makes it sound like an upright. So really the early story of the electric bass is a story of practicality. As you said, it fits in the trunk rather than strapped to the top of the car. And for people who do choreography, you can wear it over your shoulders and you can do the dance steps. But also it's loud. It can suddenly be heard. When you're playing upright in the 50s, they're not individually miking the bass on the bandstand. That's not how this works. So all the stories of the later session players, like when I talked to Chuck Rainey, one of the things he said was the first time he saw electric bass was seeing a Hank Ballard in the Midnighter show. And the thing that stood out to him is like he could hear the bass. Suddenly, there's all these stories of these later musicians. Jack Cassidy basically told me the exact same story, which is that they went as kids, heard these early people, and then from that finally heard the bass, heard what it was doing, heard how it could contribute to the music, and then were really drawn to that. So what starts as practical suddenly transitions into becoming this musical phenomenon.
You capture that really nicely, and it's sort of like this whisper that people go out to live and they go, wait, I could really hear the bass. Oh, he's playing one of those weird new electric basses, and how that sort of caught fire. I think many casual observers, music fans, maybe even bass players, would credit Leo Fender for inventing, I'm using air quotes here, the electric bass with his 1951 release of the Precision, the first version of the Precision. But that's not really the full story, is it?
Yes, one of the things I trace in the book is going back to like the original electric basses, which are like electric uprights from the 30s and into the 40s. And then I also talk about Everett Hull and the Ampeg. One of the things that we like to do in history is we like to like pick one person and turn them into a hero. We want to valorize like Leo Fender is the guy who changed everything. But that's not really how innovations work. He was listening to other bands. He saw these early electric uprights. He knew about other inventions going on. One of the things that's interesting to trace in the book is just how many different people were experimenting with electric bass technology. And it turns out his, for a variety of reasons, was the one that worked. It was the one that was functional. And that actually had more to do with the amplifier than the instrument, because he had viable amplifiers that could produce a low end without blowing up, basically. And even then, those early Fender bassmen all blew blew up anyway. But it was better. It was a step forward from what other people had done. But what's interesting, I think, as a historian is to try and get away from just who's the one great person who did it and really look at all the other people who had a hand in the invention, whether that's people who worked with Fender in his factory in Fullerton, whether it's the mariachi bands that Fender witnessed and then you understood, oh, hey, a loud fretted bass line would be useful.
How is that pronounced? Guitarron?
Guitarron, yeah.
Yeah, it's a 6-string mariachi bass.
They're very big. So they have a big sound. So all of those things were in the air, and Leo Fender's drawing on all of them. That is to say, I don't mean to discount his success or his innovations. I talk about James Jamerson, and I talk about how great Jamerson was, but I also talk about the engineers and the producers and all the other people who had a hand in crafting that Jamerson bass sound. The point of doing that is not to diminish Fender, diminish Jamerson. It's to really show this human element that led to these great inventions that we all value today.
I think you do a great job of that. In one case, you mentioned Joan Anderson, who was a very early electric bassist and an anomaly as a female bassist in a country combo, which included a very young Patsy Cline.
What I'm trying to do is not just retell the same old stories that we've heard before. When I was doing the research and really digging into things, what I was looking for were the voices and names of people that I didn't know personally that I could learn more about. You watch a country music documentary, and then here's a photo of Patsy Cline. This happened in the Ken Burns documentary on country music. There's a shot of Patsy Cline in this band, and I paused it, and I'm like, that's a woman holding a Fender precision bass in 1953. First generation precision bass, I think in 52, 53 is the photo. I then was like, what can I find out about this woman? And really, the reason it was intriguing to me is, well, first, just having a woman electric bass player in the 50s is not the story we tend to think of. People credit Carol Kay as maybe the first big woman in bass playing.
Fantastic human.
And one of the things I try to do in the book is really add a lot of women to this story and show that it's not that there weren't women playing the bass, it's that the records that survive of women playing the bass are just few and far between, and we haven't valued them as much as we should. So, for all the ink that's been spilled about Carol Kay or about James Jamerson or these famous players, there were thousands of bass players who we don't know about, and a good portion of them were probably women. So one of the things I try to talk about, even though I don't know much about Joan Anderson's story beyond what I talk about in the book, is to just show how a story like that points out that maybe there's more going on than we're used to considering.
More to come from Brian Wright very soon. And remember, if you want to enter to win a copy of The Bastard Instrument, email an answer to the following trivia question to 4stringspod@gmail.com. This episode's question is, which company brought an electric bass to market first, Fender or Rickenbacker? Now, back to our interview with Mr. Mike Watt. Just to be a little slavishly dedicated, I ended up finding somehow a 1973 Fender Telecaster bass, similar to the earlier one that you had. I did the same thing with the PJ EMGs. Last time, that was the only time I had an active pickup set up because I really wanted to sound like what I think you were playing on Double Nickels. That clear...
Double Nickels, there's no EMGs yet.
Okay.
Now here's the reason why me and D. Boon get EMGs. Black Flag had the same problem. We sweat so much in our gigs, you'd lose all your high end halfway through the set. We thought the EMGs were harsh sounding, but they were sealed in epoxy.
Yeah.
So it was a total pragmatic. It wasn't a tone thing at all. Half of Double Nickels on the Dime is recorded with a Fender P that I bought from Durf Scratch.
Oh, wow.
For Fear.
Fear, yeah.
There was something called the Recycler here for 75 cents on Thursdays. It'd come out, all the ad. Right, all my cars, everybody bought everything in this thing. Band members, right? And I bought this. Durf is Fred backwards. His parents are selling real estate on the beach in Santa Monica. I buy this bass for $300. That's half of that. And it's got a DiMarzio, which had a hot kind of P-bass pickup.
It's a passive.
It's passive.
Yeah.
And then in between, like I said, we get the album done in November. untitled album that becomes one half. This guy's in Koreatown here. He's given up music for religion, and I buy this Telecaster. Now, the only thing, it's a 68 Telecaster. Everybody knows Telecaster bass is actually a P bass made after 68 because Leo kept the same name but changed the more Stratocaster style. In fact, I got a halfway one, a 56 P bass that's got the Stratocaster body but still the little pickup. The only thing that's Fender on that bass was the neck. You know, because the neck's got the date on it.
Oh, right.
The body was actually some fucking swamp ash Schecter thing. It weighed a ton. And he had a Fender DiMarzio J pickup and a P pickup that was in there. He had taken out the original stuff. When I get the MGs, I also, since I got to do that shit, I paint it white. I paint it white. And I used epoxy paint that you paint refrigerators with. So the REM tour and the Co-Conspirator tour, it's a white base, and it's got EMGs. And we put EMGs in D. Boon's Telecaster, too. Except he keeps the big humbucker because he starts really getting into Kurt Kirkwood, knee puppets.
Yeah.
He loves that sound on Up on the Sun.
What a great record.
D. Boon's treble thing was also about this political thing about letting the bass and drums in. Because he learned from the R&B guys, if you play all clipped and trebly, you leave room for those guys. He thought the problem was the guitar player's Bogart. It was kind of a mindset. They wouldn't let the rest of the band in. And us seeing gigs at clubs, you hear drums and bass. Wow, I didn't even know a bass had 4 strings. Well, I knew it had 4 strings. I didn't know they were bigger because you couldn't see at the arena. You know, Lorna Doom, those are bigger strings. No wonder there's 4. So really, us finding out about us stuff informed our decisions. That's why we went to the EMGs. But I thought they were kind of harsh. The fun thing about Double Nickels on the Dime, that's an 8-track Otari machine.
Oh, that's what you tracked it on?
Yeah, so Georgie's got 4 of the tracks. Kick, snare, and then the toms and stereo.
Yeah.
So there ain't a lot of tracks for me and D. Boon. My bass is totally direct.
Wait, did you bounce anything to make more room? No, I guess you didn't really need to, right?
Didn't bounce.
D vocal, D guitar, Mike vocal, Mike guitar.
Boon on vocal, and then maybe a lead guitar. And that's the only time he used a pedal. He used a tube screamer for some leads.
Right.
But no microphone bass, all direct bass. We had an amplifier going in the room so Georgie could hear.
But that's not what you were tracking. That wasn't mic'd. That was just for monitoring.
There might have been a little bleed maybe or something, but it's mainly a direct box.
And you guys played all together. There's not a scenario where you and George would lay down rhythm and a D and sang together as well?
Minutemen recording sessions were like gigs in front of the microphones. We had to do them so econo. We even recorded them in order so we wouldn't have to spend money sequencing. We'd always do downtime, which meant midnight to 8, and we used used tape because it was half price. Used to get 15 minutes out of a 30 ips reel, right? Econo was not just a slogan.
No, it was a way of life. Ethan, I only met him a few times, but first of all, Radio Tokyo recorded probably some of my favorite SST records were recorded in that room. What a nice guy. We ended up working with Michael James, no relation, but he was sort of an apprentice there. And I guess Richard Andrews was also doing some work. That was such an important studio. I think under-heralded too for the scene, for the California punk scene.
Well, Ethan James, he was born Ralph Kellogg. He's actually the keyboard player for Blue Cheer for 2nd, 3rd, and 4th albums. He's a Sacto man, Sacramento. He changes his name to Ethan James. So that's probably why there's no relation.
There you go. Yeah.
He ends up being huge into hurdy-gurdies. He ends up becoming a future soloist for the San Francisco Philharmonic on a hurdy-gurdy.
Ethan James?
30 albums, and then the cancer gets him in his 50s. Terrible.
He was young.
Yeah. And man, he just had... We love Spotsky, too. Both Spotsky, same kind of guy.
Fantastic, yeah.
That never got in the way of the band. It was more like a documentary. If anything, just try to keep you a little fishing. But that's it. And we were way into being efficient.
Changing topics here now. Your 125 months with the Stooges. What did you take away from that musically or in terms of how you did things?
Oh, yeah. How to take direction. Big time.
From Ig?
Or Stooges, Stooge music. To me, there's a Stooge music. So in a way, you're trying to reach across the barrier to Dave Alexander. Because to me, especially Funhouse, oh my God, the bass is so incredibly important. That record sounds like it could have been recorded next week. It does not sound old-timey. It's incredible. take direction from Ig, from Ronnie, Scotty, even Brother Steve on the sax, but especially Dave Alexander, the way he approached the song and stuff like the Song Fun House. You could tell they built off Dave.
Yeah, certainly feels that way.
Then I remember them telling me the story about Little Doll, that bass lick, and I went and listened. The second part of Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt, Pharaoh Sanders, that's the bass line. So how could you have free jazz be part of Stooge music? Because Stooge music was a product of all that stuff. Those cats listen to TVI with that snare on the one. That's a Motown. They listen to all kinds. When I say take direction, at first I get into music to be with my friend. Now I'm in music here since I'm going to keep doing it, here to learn.
That's great.
And since my friend's on, let's take it with the guys I'm playing with.
And it was a good transition into now. When I go to Hoot Page now, which is your website for those who don't know, the listing of releases and things that are coming up, the dizzying, Mike, it's insane the amount of music that you are still making on a monthly, annual basis, even if you're not touring as much, although it seems like you are doing a lot of touring.
This tour I just did was my 70th. So only 7 more, Stan.
Well, what are your criteria for the projects that you work on now? Is there some sort of standard you need to hear in the music, or is it the people? How do you decide where you put your creative energy now?
Well, time. I got stuff I got to record right now. Like, cats, I just got something in the email. You're right. Is it the music itself or is it the person? Because the person can be very intriguing, because without you there, maybe the music ain't all there yet. Maybe you're a big part of what it's going to become. So the person itself interests me. But sometimes it is a sound. And then sometimes it's something like, oh my God, what can I do here? It's not easy. It's very difficult. But I think that's a good thing. It's like running at the beach or like with big weights on your ankles or some shit. Didn't Liszt do some piano? Franz Liszt with the weights? I think he ruined his hands doing it.
Weighted fingers.
Crazy ass. And that's one of the bitching things about recording remote, because they don't have to go through all that kvetch. Sometimes a little kvetch, though, is good because resistance. So it's mainly a time thing. If I got time, man, I feel it. I don't like the empty stuff. I think to really walk the walk of like everybody's got something they can teach me, you got to keep yourself open.
Now, are a lot of these commissions, do people offer to pay you, or is it just you collaborate with the people you want to collaborate with? It's kind of a personal question, but I just want to get a sense of how you run your business.
Yeah, a lot of time, no payment. Well, one thing about being a Minuteman or coming from working people, you learn to live at pretty econo, so you can do that stuff.
Right.
So I ain't that extended out. I live basically the way I did a long time ago, econo and small. But these get you ready for the gigs where they do pay you.
I see. It's a way to stay sharp.
See, that's the way I'm playing, because I wasn't a born musician. So I think every time you play, you invest in the next time you play. None of it's wasted. They're all kind of prac. Of course, the most real prac is in front of people, but you got to do all those other kinds of prac too. And composing and coming up with parts and recording for people. People pay money for schools to do that stuff.
Yeah.
So I consider it part of my tie to be in the big bass brotherhood.
That's funny. Your ex-wife, Kira, said a similar thing to me. She said when people reach out to her to collaborate, she generally just does it because it's a way to give back to art and to music.
Oh, that too. As far as the scene.
Yeah.
Big reason for my radio show, I don't know if you connected.
22 years. Watt from Pedro.
24 years, 3 months now.
There you go. Well, I'm glad you're fact-checking me in real time like a Trump speech. But you were so early committed to it.
We were going to get exposure. I should be given exposure.
Right. The technology is an enablement for you. It's not the reason that you do it, but it's how you do it. And I thought that was a really interesting way of going about it.
I thought there were so many parallels to the movement, to what was happening technology-wise. I thought websites were like fanzines. I thought everybody'd have their own website. They wouldn't go to the corporate spin magazine. They'd have their own little, right? No filter. But you know how humans are.
Well, how capitalism is. One of the recent collabs that I really have been enjoying from you is the Baguetta Keltner records. They've become like my dinner party go-to music. Everyone's like, what is that? It's so cool. It's jazzy, but those collaborations are so interesting. And obviously, Jim Keltner, well into his 80s now, and Baguetta, whom you play with in mssv as well. But it's like you guys bring out a different side when the three of you collaborate. And I'm wondering, how does that come together?
Okay, Jim Keltner, you said much older than me.
Even older than us, yes.
But Mike Baguetta only in his 40s.
Yeah.
So the other way, too. Mike Baguetta made that happen. I think he did it through the studio man, Chris Schlarb. Both those albums were done one day each. They were almost like gigs.
Did you have the music ahead of time, or did you guys literally collaborate in real time, same day?
The first time it becomes Wall of Flowers.
Yeah.
He comes in with the sheet music.
Do you read sheet music?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Not the best, but you learn certain things over time. But yeah, I could read it, and I was playing. But man, he had like the tempo changing every couple bars and shit. So after a while, he said, fuck this. And he gave me a chord charge for the hospital song, but all the rest is improvised.
Wow.
And then when we do the second record, no charts. Mike Baguetta, and I've noticed this about young people, they're open-minded. They check out what's going on. And it's not like, I know the way it is. They sense what's up. It's sort of like a smart guy with a sailboat. Hey, the wind's blowing this way. You aid and abet the song. He's really good that way. In a way, he's got some bass player mentality about running a band. Mike Baguetta's. Now, he went to school. He's taught. Maybe that's why. But with Mike Baguetta, not even D. Boon wrote me bass parts. This is new. I've never had people write bass parts for me before.
Oh, so he would write parts.
Those parts on the mssv albums are not my parts. I like playing them. What he told me he did was take a drum machine and put bass notes with a MIDI and then play the pads to make the bass lines, send them to me, ask me to learn them. Then write Hodges drum parts.
That's crazy.
And then we come here and then play together after we learn this stuff. It is. But I think the more different ways, I think it's like the body, like in different kinds of nutritions. It's good to get things from different angles.
It certainly seems like he was channeling you with those parts. If those are your interpretations of parts that he originally wrote with you in mind, it makes a ton of sense. I don't know if anyone would know that if you hadn't told us that.
Wow. Okay. I try to stay faithful. Sometimes I had to change a little because I couldn't play that way. But like on the second album, there was I remember one, I did a little kvetch. I said, too fast, too many notes. He said, yeah, but I think you can do it. Okay. And I practiced more and I did it. Sometimes it's good to get out that comfort, get in the sand and start jogging. Of course, there's no egos involved, no personalities. He's not shaming you in front of the other band members or so. You know what I mean? But there's a healthy kind of thing of like, well, maybe I got to try a different thing here.
Now, are you guys in the same studio when you record those records?
Yes. In fact, that's a guy who helped him connect with Jim Keltner, Chris Schlarb. He's got the studio in Long Beach called Big Ego. And he was starting this label. And Mike Baguetta told me, Chris Schlarb asked him. Chris Schlarb, actually, friend of Nels Cline. That's my connection. Yeah, it's a trip how these things kind of are. But I'll make a record for you if you can get Jim Keltner or Watt on the same record. This is what I was told late after the fact. Okay, that's how that record happened. Can you believe that?
Who did he reach out to first? Jim or you?
Chris told me he made the calls at the same time.
Conference called you both in.
And I had done other things for him. That's how I thought Mike Baguetta was, just another one of these guys. But for him to put the charts down and say, we're going to change course, I thought that was really this is a good band leader. Because you know what? He's not going to try to make something false. This is what he's got at hand. And he's going to try his best, like they say in vaudeville, work the room.
When you tour, you said previously that you just bring one bass with you. Is that still the case? So if you break a string, I think I've seen you change a string on stage, but you probably don't break strings that much.
I used to a lot.
Yeah, I think I saw you do that once. I was like, oh, where's the tech?
I have to play gigs with the strings in my waist, and I got really good at changing them quick. But since less younger hands, I ain't broke one in a long time. I just can't play that hard anymore. Like that gig you saw me in 2012. I can't play that hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, you weren't playing softly when I saw the Dick Watt tour, but I don't recall any broken strings. You using mostly flat wounds these days?
Live rounds.
Oh, okay.
Live rounds. What am I using? What's this new Diodario New York XL, NY XL?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because I wanted that attack. Yeah, we didn't want to lame out the show with the, excuse me, so get to it, do a little rap while you're changing them, learn how to do it quick. But my playing has changed. It has. Now, I have flat wound basses here at home that I record with that have flat wounds. I like flat wounds.
Right.
They're interesting. I remember as a kid, God, there was nylon tape wounds, in fact. And yeah, it didn't sound like Live at Leeds. Didn't sound like Wheels of Fire. Jack Bruce, John Entwistle, Geezer Butler, they got me into that round wound. Where the Jamerson thing, more the flat wound. In fact,
right.
I got a Thunderbird with an old 51 pickup with flat wounds, so I can get his kind of thumping thing. I got a Moon Larry Graham model. It's kind of like a jazz.
I thought I saw you play it in one of the more recent videos. You're sitting and you're playing that white Larry Graham bass.
And I do a lot of recording with that one. Well, three of them. The Thunderbird, that one, and then I got a 56P bass. I got it for $200 because they had no pickup. But I thought, because the guy carved a big-ass hole, but I thought you got Curtis Novak to put a P-bass split pickup inside that Thunderbird case. So it's like an old P-bass.
Oh, okay. That's what it is.
You know what? It's got round wounds, but they're Thomas stick. Those expensive Austrian.
Oh, yeah. Those are like $80 a set or something.
It's incredible, but man, they are good. Wow. So that's what that bass. So those are my three recording basses. All my recording gets done with those three basses.
Right.
Except this last MSV album, Mike Baguetta wanted me. He said, look, you've been using this Watt Plower on tour. Put it on the album.
Oh, okay. So you played that on the record?
That's on the album. Mike Baguetta, great band leader, even only in his 40s, a younger man. And I think it's because what's that guy, Peter Sellers, be in there? I like to watch. Yeah, I like to watch. He checks out stuff. He sees situations. And yeah, I've done all these more things than he has, but I learned from him. And part of it is see how he picks up on what I've learned and what the situations are. It's really interesting. One danger about being around a long time is you think you know it all. People can't teach you anything. Very dangerous place.
I agree with that. Speaking of dangerous places, for a segue, will we be getting another Dose record?
Wow.
Loaded question.
Well, I just had her on. She's working on a second solo album.
I love that first record. It's so good. Her first solo record.
Yeah, she's getting another one going now. Her and her brother lost an old musical friend, so a lot of it's going to be dedicated. In fact, I think they got some of his recordings she's working with. Years ago, yeah. And when she gets done with that, yeah, I'll ask. Because Dose's so important. Like you said, Firehose. Those first records, all Dose songs. I didn't know Edward. See, I didn't know you had to pay not to have your phone number.
He tracked you down.
Calls me up, and I'm coming over. Yeah, you mean you're coming over? And he did. So I didn't know what to write for him. We repurposed Dose songs.
Yeah.
Really important. When I lost D. Boon, those were the worst years. I can't even play Firehose songs. It's such a bad time in my life. But Edward helped me so much, and Dose and Kay, oh my God. So when she has time again, yeah, I would love to make another Dose album with her.
Well, I mean, she's got a bustling career as a dialogue editor and award-winning. Incredible.
She ends up getting an Oscar and Emmys and the Golden Reel, right? Yeah, I'm very, very proud of her. Incredible.
It is nice to see, right? You guys are married and now you're apart, but you guys are still, she said you still fight like cats and dogs a bit in the studio, but it's all in the service of the creative effort.
It never gets personal anymore. We're tighter friends now, not married, than we were. It's just the reality. Sometimes it happens like that.
I think a lot of us would love to hear another Dose record and see you guys out on the road. Oh my God, that would be amazing.
We used to do little 3-4 gigs during my other tours. She'd come in and we'd play for people. And people really tripped on it. The idea of making a band out of two basses.
The first Dose record didn't have a lot of vocalizing. Just the two of you just going back and forth. It was incredible. A lot of people who write to me about this show talk about Dose and how important it was to them and is.
You know what I found out about two basses? Duke Ellington was the first to do it. And then John Coltrane, live at Seattle's got two basses. Got the idea from Duke. He would have Dr. Art Davis and Reggie Workman because you're both occupying a narrow space, so you got to be very choosy about who goes where. And yeah, the idea of learning by doing, Dose is a lot about that. But it informed a lot of my other music things.
Yeah, it's such good stuff.
That's why I see these things, like you're asking me about these people asking me do stuff. I see them more as O words, opportunities, than B word burdens.
You recently said in an interview, I think I play less notes now than I did in the old days.
Yeah.
And why is that?
Yeah, well, I could say evolution, but why? I think the way I hear music is different, especially without D. Boon. You know, I never had to teach him a song. I just played, and then he would come up with a part to it. Same with his tunes. But then playing on other people's songs and hearing you in context of someone else's music, seemed maybe a little too much of a Bogart. I don't know. It just seemed like there's D. Boon and then there's everybody else. And even with Dose, I started playing more econo because I was just telling you only have the little frequency and you got to pick your things. So I started getting more choosy. I think maybe that's it, getting more choosy. And then even in fIREHOSE, in some songs, I was playing too many notes.
Which we love. They sound great. All the notes.
Well, where I was at that time, it seems like you get smaller when you play more because low end has big wavelengths, so they compete with each other. If you got too much fastness goes and you end up getting smaller and smaller. So instead of more notes, what about the more essential notes? That's maybe where I've been going now with my music thing since being a Minuteman. Well, I'll always be a Minuteman, but a less younger Minuteman. It's like, make it count for the tune. Make sure you always check in with the tune and how them notes are working, where they're placed, of course, how many there are, and how long they last. With low end, there's a lot of gravity. I mean, the closest thing, I remember being asked by the baseball team here, the Dodgers, what's this bass stuff? Because one of the guys is Pedro guy, so he wants me on. What are you trying to do, Watt? I said, that kick drum? That's my closest note. I'm trying to dance with that. And I think maybe a little fewer notes, maybe a little easier to...
Swings a little more.
A little easier to dance. But there's nothing wrong. If it works, right? So if you liked what I did, then it worked. But here's the other thing, too. Maybe you already did that. Do you want to be a Xerox machine? I think we started talking. That's one of the goals, not to become... Yeah, I remember D. Boon saying, you can play anything, just be the Minutemen. Watt, you can be anything, just be Watt. Okay.
Well, you were one of the first punk bands of that era to do classic rock covers, Red and the Black, which you still cover to this day. And you had a Steely Dan cover. Steely Dan, I love Steely Dan, but most people in the punk rock scene of the 80s would have slit their wrists before they play a Steely Dan song.
We were trying to really get out of this idea of genre. We thought music was music. And in fact, that's why we got into that movement, punk movement, because I don't know if you remember, but there was punk versions of every music. Now we think of punk as only hardcore, but that was only one thing. And Pogues, there's like Irish punk.
Or Suicide.
Or Suicide or Throbbing Gristle.
Yeah.
I saw Genesis playing bass. He blew out the PA. They played her in Culver City. First note, first song. They blew out the PA. So, that could have bass. The whole idea of genre really is poisonous. I don't like it. Some marketing man's idea of a shortcut. And there's no shortcut on the truth. So Minutemen, some of that stuff was satire, but part of that satire was to show you that music is music and your band is your way of expressing things. So let the freak flag fly.
Well, I mean, just because you played them in quicker bursts and more sardonically, you're seriously, I assume you're fans of the song Dr. Wu, the Red and the Black. You were music fans. Classic rock was the first way you guys bonded a bit, if you consider Creedence and those guys classic.
When I met D. Boon, the only rock band he knew was Creedence. We were 12. But with Steely Dan, if you want to know why I chose that song, there's another song on that record that's kind of tied to this. It's called Take 5D, where I read the landlady's note. Don't use shower.
Don't use the shower, yes.
Because the ceiling's leak. This is why I used that landlady's note. D. Boon says to me once, your lyrics, they're too spacey. I said, too spacey? Yeah. They don't know what you're talking about. You got to get more real. So that's landladies. Is this real, D-Boon? Because part of the joke of Double Nickels is we each have a solo song.
Right.
That's my solo song. D-Boon's is Cohesion. Georgie's is You Need the Glory with the oil cans. Yeah, whistling. So the other side of the landlady's notes is Steely Dan because I never knew what the fuck they were singing about. So that's why I'm making fun of maybe Watt writes spacey words because Watt likes Steely Dan.
There you go.
Like a lot of Minutemen, inter-band dialogue that we're letting people in on. People's making fun of my words, so I'm using this Steely Dan fig leaf here. Don't blame me. Here's the big challenge for me with double nickels. I'm switching over bass to bass. I'm switching over from pick to fingers.
Right.
All the other people who are listening who aren't bass players, this probably don't mean to fuck.
Well, pretty much everyone who listens is bass or bass adjacent, from what I can tell.
You know about this thing about the pick and the fingers,
it's
right?
a huge battle. Some people invalidate anyone who plays with a pick. Some people say punk has to have a pick. There's a whole, yeah.
Wow. Now, when punk, I first get in the movement, I got to use a pick. I can't play fast enough. You know, by that time, I find out pick ain't really about playing fast or slow. It's a kind of vocabulary. It's just probably best to play both.
Absolutely.
You want my honest opinion?
Sometimes in the same song.
I saw John Entwistle do that. And slapping. I saw him do all three in the same song.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Why not? It's all vocabulary.
Probably Eminence Front, right? I'm thinking now. That's a song that seems to have...
I remember that song. Yeah, and it was a solo band. It wasn't The Who.
Oh, okay.
And they were all playing Steinbergers wearing overcoats and shit. And half the stage was his amps. But to see him use all those techniques in the same song, why not? That's like being a genre band. It's vocabulary. It's all whatever. So I'm really preoccupied with this switchovers. The record before that, Buzz or How, that's the last one with all pick.
Let the products sell themselves.
There's one song called Ship from an Old Notepad. Appropriate.
Great song.
It was. Boon, the words rhymed. I never got them. Yeah, I always get the, what's it called? Stream of thought lyrics. Let the product sell themselves. Yeah. That's the last song I played with the fucking pick. I'm so preoccupied with learning how to play with my fingers again that I only do, I think, 2 vocals on the whole record. I stopped doing vocals.
Yeah, there's not a lot of vocals from you in that.
No, because I'm really concentrating on how to play bass with fingers.
But you wrote a lot of the lyrics, History Lesson Part 2, after which Michael Azerrad named his classic book, Our Band Could Be Your Life. Those are your lyrics, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I wrote most, I just didn't write the good songs. I wrote most of the songs. Georgie and D. Boon wrote the better songs. But I wrote most of the stuff. But especially with that record, I'm making the transition. So I am so preoccupied with learning how to play. Plus, I got this Telecaster bass. So not only a new way of playing, another bass.
Let me ask you this last question, because you've been very generous with your time. It sounds like you have some major construction going on, another pool house in the Mike Watt Pedro compound.
The upstairs apart, got termite damage, so they have to remove that area.
I figured it was something like that.
Not so much a Mike Watt compound.
So when you do play live, you end, if not all, at least most of the shows that I've seen, the last thing you say on stage is start your own band. Yeah. And one question we always ask at the end of the show, just to be a podcast cliche, to have a fixed question, what are some other pieces of advice that Mike Watt would impart to a new bassist, a young bassist, or an older person playing for the first time? Advice to a new bassist.
Well, new bass living now?
Yes.
They got the resource YouTube?
They do.
Okay, then go listen to some James Jamerson playing on them Motown records. Oh, my God. Because I learned so much from that cat. And I wish somebody would have told me that way back.
Right. And we didn't have the ability to just dial it up back in the day. So, yeah, even whether it's listening to the full combo, nowadays everyone has isolated bassline versions of everything. There's ways to rip the bassline out and just have that featured or not have it featured.
Or have it on one side, mix it in your own way.
Yeah, the Beatles mix.
That's usually how I get a guide track from people. So put the drums on one side, everything else on the other. So if I want, I can get right with that drummer. Because that kick drum, there's something about that kick drum. And when I'm thinking of James Jamerson now, remember, he's got regular guys he plays with, but the work they're doing, they have a new singer coming in every day, couple singers.
Yeah.
So I think this is his mission. How am I going to hook the drums up to the singer? That's what I hear. Remember that dilemma I told you of the session bass guy? He's got to hear the song. He's got to come up with a part. Got to perform it. That's what he did every day. But I think his go-to was listen to the singer, listen to Pistol Pete or Benjamin. Somehow I got to marry these two. And I got to make it so over that AM radio on the car dash, you can still hear me.
You can hear it, yeah.
Right? You can hear him. You know, me playing all hard and stuff. I think you get more low end playing softer. He played really soft with one finger.
One finger, the claw.
Yeah, or the hook.
The hook, that's sorry, yeah.
Bass guitar. It's still evolving. It's still mysterious. I love it. But I really don't see it, the future of it, more strings. I see it more as a composition tool. That's where I see its future.
That's good to hear.
Why can't the bass part be first? I'm having cats, here's my new thing, drums first. Why can't the drums be first?
As long as they communicate the song, sure.
Yeah, Charlie Mingus, right? Always on the piano. Mingus Fingers, his first one. Wouldn't write on the bass. I wonder what a Mingus song would sound like written on the bass. So that's where I see a lot of potential still. Bass as composing tool.
That's a great, great place to end on. Mike, thank you for all your music over the years and for agreeing to do this today. It means a lot to me personally and to our listeners.
Oh, Sandy, you're the best. You ask me stuff that I wish I get asked.
I'm really looking forward to when you guys come to town next spring. I can't wait to hear it.
Okay, man. And you ever need anything or ask me anything, just give me a shout.
Appreciate that, Mike. Thank you so much again.
Okay, big love.
You too. Not much more to say after that. Please see Mike Watt when he comes to town. Buy all his stuff on Bandcamp and, as he might say, start your own band. To keep up with his relentless spigot of music, check out his website, hootpage.com. That's Hootpage, Hoot, and just scroll through the news section. Thanks again for making it to the end of another episode. We have some more exciting conversations coming up, including some folks who've been pretty press shy over the years. And we do really continue to appreciate the kind reviews. Thank you for them. And sure, why not? If you have requests about bass players you want to hear from, send them to 4stringspod@gmail.com. That's 4stringspod@gmail.com. I can't guarantee we'll honor them, but it's good to know who you want to hear from. Be good to each other and keep it on the low end.
Audiation.